Hello all. So this is our second lesson in our Mumbai series of lessons. For those of you that were present in our first lesson, we started to look at our Indian city, and our Indian city example, which we've been focusing on, is the city of Mumbai. Now, we spent a lot of our time last lesson doing what I would call placemaking. And what that means is that we got a sense of what Mumbai is like as a place. We looked at some video clips. We started to look at some images and some pictures to see what day-to-day life is like for people that might live in Mumbai. What we're going to do today is we're going to take our understanding and our knowledge that we've already gained of Mumbai, and we're going to take it to the next level. And we're going to take it to the next level by starting to explore an issue which impacts upon people that not just live in Mumbai, but live in the areas surrounding Mumbai. And actually, it's an issue really that's not just prevalent, not just important for people that live in places like India. It's important for people that live in low-income countries in lots of different areas of the world. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to present my screen to you now so that I can guide you through the slide deck and guide you through the tasks and the work that we're going to be completing during today's session. So we've got one key question which we're going to be looking to answer by the time we get to the end of this particular lesson. And that question you can see here underneath the target question, which says, why would somebody want to migrate to Mumbai? Okay. Now, we can't answer that question unless we can guide ourselves through the success criteria that's on the left-hand side. So there's already a keyword which you guys are going to need to be able to define within the title, but also within the target question that's on the right-hand side. And that keyword is migrate. Now, migration or migrating is not the only keyword that we need to define. There are going to be a few more which are going to be really important for today's lesson. And when it comes to geography, quite often, being able to use keywords can set you apart from other geographers. You show that you know the knowledge, you show that you know the subject, and that you're willing to use really sophisticated language. Once we've done that, what we're going to do is we're going to identify something which we call a push factor and something which we call a pull factor. And we're going to be looking at an example of a person, and we're going to try and relate it to real life as much as we possibly can. And it probably doesn't surprise you that actually two of those keywords which we need to look at during this lesson are also the keyword push factor and pull factor. Because if you're looking at the success criteria at the moment and you're thinking, I haven't got a clue what's going on, well, we need to be able to define those words to make sure that you've got that level of knowledge and that level of understanding. So I'm going to start off by looking at some of the keywords we need to know. Now, some of these are keywords that you will have tackled further down the school, particularly when you start to look at issues of population at an earlier stage, looking at population densities, looking at migration. But let's just make sure that we understand these keywords. The first keyword that we've got here is the word migration. Now, I've used this graphic or this picture that you can see here of some birds. And I've put them there because we quite often talk about birds migrating. And when a bird migrates, what it's doing is it's moving from one place to another. So when we're talking about migration, we're talking about people moving from one place to another. Now, as you start to move up the school and you start to get onto GCSE, you'll learn about lots of different types of migration. We get economic migrants, forced migrants, but what I want us to do is to just think about it as a principle, okay? If you migrate, you are moving from one place to another, okay? Now, people can migrate on lots of different scales. People migrate across borders from one country to another, but people also migrate within a country, and we would call that internal migration. If I took the decision to move to Liverpool, for example, I'd still be migrating. I would still be a migrant. But there are some factors that we need to take into consideration. We need to take into consideration something which is called a push factor and something which is called a pull factor. Now, a push factor is a bad thing about the place where someone lives that pushes them away. And the pull factor is something that's good about another place that draws them in to want to live there. Now, I always use the example in lessons, okay, of perhaps maybe looking at our hometown. Our hometown, in terms of life, it might seem a little bit dull and a little bit boring. So you might want to move to Ibiza, and you might want to migrate to Ibiza because there's exciting opportunities. There's the ability to be able to be in the sun. There's the party lifestyle. So from that perspective, all of the good things about Ibiza, the weather, the party lifestyle, the opportunities, those are the pull factors that are drawing you in. And the push factors might be the bad things about where you come from. Perhaps it's boring, there's not much to do, the weather's not fantastic, okay? Those would be the push factors that would force you away. Now, whenever we're making a decision to migrate, push factors and pull factors are going to be really, really important. Now, I've just given you an example of how we can use push factors and pull factors. What we're actually going to be doing is we're going to be exploring in a little bit more depth and detail what specific push and pull factors might be for someone that's looking to make that move into a location and into a place like Mumbai in India. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to give you a little bit of time before I introduce you to our example, just to make sure that you've got those definitions written down, okay? What I would suggest, because I've not put a timer on this particular slide, is for you to pause it now, open up a Google document or get out your notes and jot down for me a definition of migration, push factor and pull factor, because you're going to need to refer back to them. Okay, so the example that we're going to look at today is we're going to look at our character that you can see here. His name is Emil. Okay, and Emil lives within a rural area of India. And what that means is he lives in the countryside. Now, because he lives in the countryside, you can see it's pretty clear what he does for a living based on the picture that's in the right-hand side. He's a farmer, okay? Not only is a farmer, he's a rural farmer in a poor area. You can see that he's not really got much machinery to be able to help him with the work. And actually what we can do is we can start to make some inferences about his life, okay? So I'm going to tell you some things about him, but then I'm also going to give you some inferences, some things that we could probably assume just based on the picture. So firstly, Bill is 25 years old. He's married and he's got 3 children. Okay, now that might seem a little bit strange to you and I for someone to have 3 children at the age of 25. But remember, when we looked at population earlier, we talked about birth rates. And birth rates are much, much higher in low-income countries for a variety of different reasons, whether that's access to contraception, cultural values, or perhaps in the case of Emil, because he's a farmer, he may want to have more children so that they can help him, they can support him with the farming on the land. He lacks an education, so all he's known is farming all of his life. He's not got a formal education. He's not particularly literate. All he knows is farming, and he's very skilled at what he does when it comes to farming. But because he is a farmer, we can start to make some inferences that he's actually quite poor. Okay, so he's a poor rural farmer. He doesn't have much income. Therefore, he finds it difficult to be able to provide for his wife and his 3 children, and he suffers from some of his health. So from that respect, because he lives in a rural area, it can be difficult for him to be able to access hospitals and to be able to access healthcare. But just like any person, he wants the best for his family. Okay. Now, what this does is this places Emil in a situation. The situation is this: should Emil move to Mumbai? Should he stay where he is in his rural village in India, or should he up sticks and leave and find himself in the middle of the city, a big bustling city, mega city, in fact, like Mumbai? Now, if we're going to help Emil to be able to answer that question, what we need to explore are some of those push factors and those pull factors. So remember, the push factors are going to be the bad things about his rural area that are pushing him away, and the pull factors are going to be the good things about Mumbai that are going to be drawing him in. So here's some things that we need to consider. Here we've got his rural village, okay, and you can see from his rural village that there's lots of evidence of poverty. And I can actually start to make some inferences based on these particular images. For example, if we look here, we can see the quality of housing is quite poor. We've got waste, we've got a bit of rubbish in there, which might cause some problems in terms of healthcare. Doesn't really look like there's proper roads and infrastructure. Okay, you've got a lack of sort of technology. It looks very much like there's a lack of infrastructure, a lack of electricity, a lack of those things. And all of that gives us this evidence that perhaps maybe he's from an area which is poor. Now, in addition to that, he's facing problems. And we can see some of those problems here by looking at this picture. There's been drought in lots of areas of India. And you know that farming is very much dependent upon the seasons. It's dependent upon the monsoons. It's dependent upon what the weather is like. And if it's too dry, we can't grow crops. And that's pretty clear when it comes to this picture. Now, there'll be a link between the two, because if the amount of money was limited when it comes to farming in the first place, if his crops have been destroyed by drought, that's even less money that he's got in order to be able to provide for himself and to be able to provide for his family. And ultimately, that's going to cause lots of problems for someone like Emil. In addition to that, we mentioned that he's got healthcare problems. There's a lack of access to healthcare within rural areas of India. So, you know, he finds it difficult to be able to get to the doctors. It might be that there are health visitors that are visiting the village, but that's very infrequent. And if you look at the quality of some of the hospitals and healthcare provision, okay, not fantastic. So actually, from his perspective, as someone who suffers with his health, particularly when you look at his work, you know, it's quite backbreaking work farming the land. There could be some problems and there could be some issues for him. And in addition to that, we mentioned that he doesn't have a particularly great education. because he lives in a rural area and because he's poor. Okay, we're very privileged in the UK to be able to have free education. Not always the case when it comes to places like India. His opportunities for education for his children are quite limited. Now, if we start thinking about these factors, a lack of opportunities for education, a lack of access to healthcare, drought destroying crops, and all of the evidence of poverty that we've got that comes from being a poor rural farmer, what we've got is a series of push factors. Okay, so these are the factors that are bad about the rural area that are forcing someone like Emil away. Now, what I've done is I've created a small mind map here, and you can see that I've put push factors in the middle. Now, what I want us to do is to use the symbols, which I've put up here, as a means of trying to see if we can remember what those push factors are. So, for example, I've used a symbol of a sun, okay, and that symbol of the sun signifies that there's been lots of droughts. There's not been a lot of rain, which has meant that his crops have failed. We've got here that there's not much money to be made in farming. Pound sign, down symbol to signal that there's less money. And you've got a picture here of a farm, which gives you some clues that there's not much money in farming. I've got a stethoscope here from a doctor, and I've got an arrow facing downwards. This is to indicate that there's poor quality healthcare. And then I've got a school here, which I've got a number of crosses through to look at the lack of access to education. So what I'd like you to do is I'm going to give you 3 minutes on the timer to use these symbols to jot down what are the push factors, okay? So remember, drought, a lack of money in farming, a lack of healthcare, and a lack of schooling and formal education. Then what we'll do is we'll look at those push factors in the form of a table. And what I'll get you guys to do is to kind of check off what you've written in terms of your push factors, and then we can see if there's anything that we can add. But remember, those symbols are there for you to use. Okay, so I'm just going to close down my my screen and my mic. What I want you to do is, as soon as that timer starts, I'd like you to jot down the push factors for me within 3 minutes. Okay then guys, right, absolutely excellent stuff. So let's just have a little look at how we can consolidate and break down each of those push factors. I've decided to do it in the form of a table. I've got 4 bullet points here. These 4 bullet points represent my 4 push factors. So I've got poverty and a lack of money available in farming. So a lack of money and poverty being the first thing pushing Emil away. Droughts destroying crops, poor access to healthcare services, and poor access to education services. So what I've got there on my series of 4 different push factors, which leaves us primed and ready to start looking at some of the pull factors. So in terms of the pull factors, remember, these are the good things about Mumbai that's drawing people in. Okay. Now, the first thing is that there is more varied job opportunities. Okay. They might not necessarily be the most amazing jobs in the world, but it's not just farming. So you can see here we've got an image of people working within the slums of Mumbai, looking at making pottery and things like that. But you've also got very basic jobs like recycling, rummaging, scavenging. Now, they might not seem like the sorts of jobs that we would perhaps aspire to be able to do, but there are more money opportunities that could be available for people working in cities doing these types of jobs than there would be as a poor rural farmer. Okay, not that I'm saying that you're going to make your millions out of it, but there are more varied job opportunities that are available. In addition to that, there's a better chance of education. Okay, so if you can make more money, then you're increasing the likelihood that you can send your children to school. And if you can send your children to school, then actually that could be a great way of lifting your family out of poverty. And we call that social mobility. So your children get a better education, which means that in turn they get better jobs, which means that they can start to make more money, and you can start to lift yourself out of that area of poverty. Okay. And in addition to that, you've got better services. Now, we talked about healthcare before. Okay, here you can see a hospital in Mumbai certainly looks much better than the picture in the image that we looked at first of all. But we've got better services and infrastructure. So, look at this. It looks very, very busy, and that's because Mumbai is very busy. But, we've got electricity, we've got roads, we've got cars, we've got vehicles, we've got better quality buildings and houses, we've got shops. All of those things are services that might draw someone towards a city like Mumbai. So if I had to break that down then into these symbols which I've got here, we've got more money and job opportunities that are available. We've got better access to services and education, services and healthcare. We've got better access to education, and we've got better infrastructure or better services such as roads, electricity, um, and such. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you another 3-minute timer. If you need to rewind it and go back and have a look at those pull factor images, so we've got better services and infrastructure, chance of a better education and more job opportunities, please do. That's the beauty of doing this over a pre-recorded video. You can rewind and you can pause at any given moment. But I'm going to give you 3 more minutes now to see if you can jot down some of those pull factors for me. Okay, excellent stuff then, guys. So what we've got then is we've got our push factors, and we should now also have our pull factors. So I've got 3 pull factors on my screen: more job opportunities, better chances of, or chance of a better education, and better services and infrastructure. Now, infrastructure is a complicated word, but it's a word that we use an awful lot in geography. And it's all about the cars, it's all about the rail, it's all about the road, the railway systems, the electricity. It's about all of the things that keep day-to-day life working and running. Now that brings us to our target question. So our target question is, why would somebody want to migrate to Mumbai? Well, if we're looking at why someone would want to migrate to Mumbai, just look at the push factors and look at the pull factors. Look at the push factors about the rural areas and look at the pull factors that are drawing people in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a 6-minute timer. In that 6 minutes, I'd like you to use what you've written in your notes already on your push and your pull factors. And I'd like you to write me that paragraph or a couple of paragraphs in order to explain why someone might want to migrate to Mumbai. Now, what I've done is I've put some sentence starters in here to help you out. So I've put, someone may want to migrate to Mumbai due to both push and pull factors. An example of a push factor includes, okay? And then what you can do is you can look at your list of push factors and you can start to write down some examples of those push factors. Then you move on to your next paragraph, which says an example of a pull factor includes, and then you can start to add some of those pull factors. If you really want to push yourselves, what I would like you to get into the habit of doing is being able to use connective words as much as possible. So you could say an example of a push factor includes that it's hard work farming, therefore less money can be made, which means that you can't provide for your family. And that really is how you start to develop those more sophisticated answers. I'll give you another example. An example of a pull factor includes more varied job opportunities, which means that there's more chance of being able to make more money. Therefore, you are lifted out of poverty. And being able to use connectives is so important. Okay. So 6-minute timer is going to go on, but remember, you can pause it, you can rewind it again, and you can re-look at some of the content that's in some of the video to be able to support you and help you out. Okay, but it's really good and useful to get used to running under some of those time limits, putting yourself under that little bit of pressure. Away you go, guys. Okay then, guys, right, your time is up. Okay, right, well done. Now, for those of you that have been looking through this, the first question that we were going to ask is, should Emil move? Now, actually, I don't think we can make that decision at the moment. And we can't make that decision because actually we're still missing quite a lot of factors. So what I want us to start thinking about really is, what else do we need to know that could support Emil in making the decision? We've got the push factors, which are the bad things about where he's living in his rural area. We've got the pull factors, which are the good things about Mumbai. But actually, what we're missing is, what are his reasons to stay? What are the reasons why it might be good living in a rural area? And the other thing that we're missing is, well, what might the reality be like when he gets to Mumbai? And it's that I would like us to focus on in our next lesson. Okay, if Emil makes that journey, what's the reality like? Is he instantly able to get an education for his children and get healthcare and be able to provide himself with a job? So just keep that as a point of reflection and something for you guys to think about as we move forward to next week's lesson. In the meantime, guys, have a great week and stay safe.